You already started? He's already started. Hi, everybody. So today we're moving right along and getting better at getting through this quicker. So today we're at Mark 1, 16 through 20, and we're talking about 4 fishermen that became disciples. And in essence, Jesus was choosing his friends. He were not just choosing friends, but he was selecting people that he knew would become world changers. How do you pick people to be in your life and to be around you that are going to be not just an impact to you, but impactful on not just your community, not just your family, but the world? When we choose our friends, what are we looking for when we choose our friends? And as some of us are closer to the end of life than we were to the beginning of life, who are your friends? Do you hang on to those friends that, I always call them generic bypass friends? The people that you went to elementary school with, they have to remain your friends for life because they went to elementary school with you. And the older you get, they become more important because they were part of your life so many years ago. And then you have the friends that you go to college with just because they may have been your roommate or they did just in your college, your alumni. My Blue Knights 1982 class of 82, we have to be friends, so to speak. We have to be concerned about everything that's happening to any of the people that graduated in the class of 1982. And then you have the new friends in life. You have, once you start getting married, you start dating, you have that group of friends, so that becomes the next generation of friends. But then somewhere things start to turn around after you have your children, then you become friends with the parents of your children, and things, it just goes on and on and on. But then there's a period in life that we're talking about. We're talking about how to be real disciples. Many of us have been Christians most of our lives. We've been believers as long as we can remember Easter and Christmas. But at some point in there, we stop being just a believer and a real believer. Some point in there, and hopefully this is the point that we're getting to, we get to that point of maturity. And so Jesus, always knowing the beginning, the end, the beginning, the middle, and the end at all times, picked his friends that he knew in the end would make a difference. He knew Peter would preach at Pentecost and more than 3,000 souls would be saved. He knew that when he picked him off of the boat fishing. So let's read the scriptures and let's talk about the correlation between what I put in the text today. Picking your friends are like picking those staple foods in your life. At some point, we want to get to a point where after coming through this pandemic, being in this pandemic, we realize that maybe we weren't as healthy as we ought to be. And whether we were healthy or not, we just want to get to a point where we're living holistically. We're not just guarding our spiritual health, but we're paying attention to our mental and our physical health as well. And as we begin to make that new journey, we've got to make some changes, just like we make the new friends. We go from our elementary school friends to our high school friends to our college friends. There's a transition, and those friends are going to be meaningful in different ways, depending on the season in which they were in your lives. So now as we're approaching the season where we're really starting to determine what's significant in life and how much of a difference am I making in life. And at this point, we've got to gird ourselves. We have to equip ourselves to be able to make a difference. And a part of that is definitely going to be what we feed ourselves. And when we talk about feeding ourselves, we have to remember that our body is a machine. And in order for that machine to function properly, it needs certain nutrients going inside. We want our brains to start working differently. We want to be able to listen to information, comprehend the information, articulate it to other people in a manner that they understand it. So we're going to have to start eating those foods that give us vitality, eating those foods that allow us to remember things. And so that's what we're talking about today, along with talking about how and why Jesus selected the friends that he did. And that comes from the first chapter. I can't believe we're still in the first chapter of Mark, the gospel that teaches us how to move. It's the action gospel. It teaches us how to be disciples. And so here we are, Mark 1, 16 through 20. And as he walked by the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and Andrew, his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. Then Jesus said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you become fishers of men." They immediately left their nets and followed him. They immediately left their nets and followed him. They immediately left their nets and followed them. Pay attention to that. When he had gone a little further from there, he saw James, the son of Zebedee, and John, his brother, who also were in the boat mending their nets. And immediately he called them, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired servants and went after him, and went after him, and went after him. Just such a wonderful story. And I wanted to reiterate those words because it's immediately, sometimes people say, in my spirit, or I should have listened to my spirit. And that's the worst thing that you can do is hesitate. When you know that the unction of the Holy Spirit is calling you to go to the left and you stand there because you had planned to go to the right. Everything you desire is at the right, but you clearly heard him telling you to go to the left and you hesitated. It's going to be disastrous. It's going to be disastrous, and you'll come back and you'll kick yourself about it. So let's pay attention to the fact that they followed him. Now, who is it that Jesus was picking? Jesus was walking along the Sea of Galilee, and he sees who? Not great theologians, not people that are highly academically trained. He sees fishermen. Not putting down fishermen, but he just sees common, ordinary folks. And it's important to focus on that, or to understand that, because as you move around, as you're in the church, a lot of times there are people that have positions in the church that are extremely important. And so a lot of times when people come into the church, especially new believers, they believe that they have to get to a level of importance. They have to get to a level where they're proving themselves. They have to get to a level where they know the Bible like the back of their hand, or they remember certain scriptures, and etc., before they feel like they could be used in a ministry, used by the church. I feel that there's a certain spiritual maturity, but that spiritual maturity is simply that thing that develops inside of us because we want to know Jesus. We want to be in a relationship with him. Therefore, what we're doing on a daily basis is reading our Bible independently, along with the corporate worship and Bible study that we attend, but we've decided that this is going to be an integral part of our lives. We're reading the Bible every day, we're praying, we're communicating with God every day, not just on our knees, but as we're walking, as we're driving, we're in constant communication, and we're developing that relationship of walking with God. That is the spiritual maturity, because you're knocking on the door, you're seeking him. And when you're doing that, he's going to fill you and equip you with what it is you need to start getting and achieving that level of spiritual maturity. But as you're getting there, you can be utilized. And so that's what Jesus is saying. Jesus is like, okay, we went through the previous ones when he began his ministry. So now he's picking out his friends. He's got his task ahead of him. He knows what the task has to be to bring people to a point where they can repent and believe. And so who's going to be along with me? I'm going to need somebody to gird me up. I'm going to need some friends. I'm going to need some support in this. And so he starts to pick his people. And interesting enough, he picks ordinary folks, but not just ordinary folks. Ordinary folks that are out there doing a day's work. Notice that when I was in the store this morning, the lady was complaining about somebody called in sick and she had to do their particular job. So notice that they were out doing the job. Imagine if Simon or John were on sick day, this day, the day that Jesus was coming and calling them. They weren't at work because, not to say that we can't be sick, but this is who we picked. Ordinary people doing their daily task for the day, working. And why is he picking people that are working? Because when God calls us, he's calling us to serve. Yes, he's calling us so that we can receive the blessings and the gracious mercy and everything, all the great stuff that comes along with it. But at the end of the day, we are being called to serve. Our chief means in life is to glorify God through that service that we do and to enjoy him forever. So this is what he's picking. He's picking people that are ordinary, but people that are working an ordinarily day's work. Why? Because he's calling them to serve. He's calling them to give up themselves. We know later on, and I try not to get too deep because this is supposed to be the simple way of learning how to walk. Notice Mark doesn't go into a lot of the things that the other synoptic gospels go into when they're calling out who he picked and, some other history behind who they are, etc. Mark is just emphasizing he called them and immediately they followed him. And so these are the people that Jesus is picking. When we're starting to think about our physical health, we want to do those things that are ordinary and simple. If you start saying, okay, what is it that I'm going to need in life? People start talking about alkaline water. Alkaline water can be as much as $10 a bottle. Why not just learn that when I take regular distilled water and I put lemon in it, I have alkaline water, and it's not going to cost me nearly as much as the alkaline water that has a name on the bottle. And so Jesus, too, is picking these ordinary people, however, ordinary people that can become extraordinary. And so when we start talking about being well, people immediately start thinking that health is associated with costly food, So I picked out some things today that are staples in my life, but more importantly, they're ordinary foods that have an extraordinary value when they're utilized in a particular way. So Jesus took these ordinary people and he utilized them in a particular way that they became extraordinary people. And why was that? Because one, they were acclimated to doing a day's work. He didn't go find them from somewhere and say, okay, well, what's going on? He found them because they were a part of what we ought to be doing on a regular basis. And then that piece that I reiterated a couple of times, he said, follow me. He didn't say come along with me, but follow me. So to follow someone is what? Who are you going to follow? They had to, and I think this is just put here to emphasize that they had already been listening to him. And so they knew him. They knew what he stood for. And so when we're picking our friends, we shouldn't have to convince people that you ought to be my friend. People should kind of organically just kind of muse with you as sure as Jesus made eye contact with them, I'm sure, and had them probably pause for a moment to reflect upon the things that he had been saying early in his ministry, this week or so that they could think about that and think as he says, follow me. Is this somebody that I want to follow? And you're not going to follow somebody that you don't believe in. A lot of disunity in the churches come from people that, I was telling someone they had an issue with their pastor. I was like, well, you need to leave the church. Because if you don't truly believe that your pastor hears directly from God and is obedient to the voice of God, then that's not a place that you should be. Jesus is selecting people that have already become familiar with what he represents. He represents teaching, one, preaching, two, for people to know God. He says, repent, turn your lives around. They want to be a part of this man that is seeking to bring people to a new place in life. Therefore, there are not going to be any arguments along the way with the way that he's doing things. And we know that there were a lot of things that he did and he suggested that you and I probably would have an issue with and that the disciples had issues with. But the respect was there because of the integrity of who and what he represented initially. And so when you're picking foods to be a part of your repertoire, I tell people, why is that even in your home? If it's something that you don't want to eat a lot of or something you say, well, I don't eat as much of it. And yes, I believe in the 80-20 rule. 80% of the time if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, 20% of the time, doesn't matter. But let that be outside of the house. Because this is your home. This is where you live and have your being. So the majority of the time, You want the things that are around you to be the things that ought to be around you. The people that are around you are to be the people that ought to be around you for the most part. Yeah, we run into people because we go into the workplace, we go into the church, but that inner circle, the people you're inviting into your home for a meal, the people that you are leaving your home to go and meet, to be entertained or to entertain yourself with them, ought to be that 80%. The people that believe in you, the people that have the same values that you have. It is so difficult now for people to get along because we're selecting to be people to be our friends and in our circles, and we don't even have the same values. Do you know? We're here to spread the word and to help other people become believers, but are we selecting non-believers to be in our inner circles? The people that you need to talk to get advice or to just, share. These are to be people that believe in the same thing that you believe in. And yes, Facebook obviously is this great tool that we can use, but we have to be very careful to guard our spirits and our souls at times, because there are a lot of people, a lot of things that are out there have nothing to do with us, and you can become absorbed in that, and it's not going to add value to you. So that's the main thing. Who did he pick? So what we're going to talk about today, Jesus picked the people that he already knew, but he also picked people that he could take them where they were as ordinary people and help them become extraordinary people. And so just being in his presence does that. And so your piece for the spiritual piece from this is that as you begin to know and have been called to this Christian walk, to become that disciple, to learn how to walk more in the steps of God, to not be as tempted and yielding more than not to the things that we ought not to do, because none of us are perfect. Yes, you're going to fall, we're going to get up, but you want to do that less than more as you start moving forward. And so this is teaching us how to make that change, and how to make that change is Jesus says, come and follow me. Today in the 21st century, that is how we become like the disciples that walked with God, is by following him. That's why I said that 3 and 4 times over again, because there's no magic here. Mark is very simplistic, and this is what happens. He says, follow me, and they immediately followed him. And that's an ongoing journey. And that is how we get to be like Peter, like John, and leave the legacies that they left, where they were world changers, changing people's lives, bringing people to God. And that is because we too have to follow God. How do we follow God in the 21st century? We get up every morning and we talk to him. We get up every morning and we study his word. When we study the Gospels, we begin to just know more and more intimately his thoughts, what he wants us to do, how he wanted us to do it, the teachings of Christ are in the Gospels, especially Matthew. If you really want to understand the teachings of Christ, you do that. And so reading the Word of God is going to get you to that place of maturity. There's no cuts, no shortcuts. There's no magic. There's no 10 seminaries you have to go to. It's right here in the Word of God. Follow me. Follow God. This is God. This is the living Word of God. Follow him. Follow him. Immediately do that. Immediately when you wake up in the morning, all throughout the day, pray without ceasing. That's just simply having a conversation. There are people in your lives that you're so attached to. Every night before you go to sleep, you have a conversation with them. First thing in the morning, you want to have a conversation with them, whether you're texting them, whether you're FaceTiming them. That person that you have decided that is that friend in your life, Jesus needs to be a priority over those people. And so just as much time as we found to devote to those intimate friends in our life, Jesus is saying, give me that kind of priority in your life. And you too will become a world changer. You too will be like Peter, John, and the others. Yes. And so that food that's going to take us to extraordinary places, that food that's going to allow us to do the things. Someone was talking about discipline this morning. And why is it that some people are just no discipline? And a lot of that, yes, is the attitude. But where does the attitude come from? I'm such a true believer that everything and every part of your being has everything to do with what you feed yourself. And so when you start feeding yourself certain foods, this is going to have you respond a certain way. And you can never doubt or refute that unless you try it. And so that's what this is all about. So today I'm going to share, I was so happy. A couple of people reached out to me over the past couple of weeks, and they tried the last recipe that we did. You know, it was the simple breakfast pudding that you put onto your berries every morning, and people really enjoyed that. They thought it was simple enough. But here, we're talking not just simplicity, but we're talking the faults that people have, not the faults, but the difficult transitions from doing where you are now to developing healthy lifestyle choices. A lot of times people say they always need something to crunch. It's the potato chip and the bread syndrome, you know, and potato chips and bread gets us in a lot of trouble. So I'm going to try to give you something that's going to simulate that in your life, something that's going to be crunchy, something that's going to be that staple. You know, if you've got a good burger or if you've got a good whatever, even when you get to a point where you're doing nice raw foods, the pâtés and the hummuses, people just want to douse it in some bread, even if it's organic whole wheat bread. But no, we want to get to a point where we can have something that's substantive like that, but is much, much better for you. And then we can do other things with it. And so the potato chip thing is just that people always say they need something crunchy. And so you can do this raw bread to a point where it can be extremely thin so that it has crunch to it, or it can be thicker. But I want to talk about that piece that I said about taking something ordinary and making it extraordinary. How Jesus took the ordinary fishermen and made them extraordinary disciples. So you can take something ordinary to defute or refute the whole claim that eating healthy has to be expensive. So these are lentils. You can get them in all colors, brown, green, or orange. I usually only soak and sprout the green ones. So these are lentils, and you buy them. This entire container can't be more than 3 pounds. So lentils are $2.33 a pound, and these are organic lentils. I mean, there's just, the cost is negligible between organic and convention, so you may as well get the organic ones. So these are lentils. Now, if you're in a family where you are really, really trying to transition, and I'm not even going to say that because cooking lentils, just look how thin they are. So they're so fragile. So for the nutrients that are in this little teeny, eeny, weeny little seed, lentil bean, when the heat gets to it, it becomes almost negligible. So the interesting thing about it is that we can reverse that. We can actually take this almost eeny bitty little thing and make it exponential in its nutritional value. In and of itself, it has great nutrient value. The minerals and vitamins that you find in lentils and all beans and nuts and seeds is amazing. But what we're talking about today are soaking and sprouting them. And so what is soaking and sprouting? A lot of times people say that and they already start, oh, that's a little too complicated for me. So we have the lentils here that most of you are probably accustomed to knowing how to cook them. They don't take long. The good thing about them is they don't take long at all to cook. But we take that and we store them in glass containers. You want to buy a lot of them because you want to eat them on a regular basis. So these are sprouted lentils. And the process is relatively simple. You know, sprouting, first of all, let's talk about what is sprouting. So sprouting is you take this lentil that has been removed from its shell and basically gone into a state of dehydration for the purposes of packaging and selling, and you bring it back to life. So you bring it as close to life as it was before it was extracted from its external pieces. And so how does something, what does it mean to bring something to life? So we have these, I don't know if you could see the flowers in the video. So we have these fresh flowers that have been cut from the bushes in which they were grown off of. And so now they're beautiful, but in a moment, a few weeks, if you know how to take care of your flowers, they're going to die, you know? And that's because we've taken them from their natural source. But right now, they're still alive, though they've been cut from their source. So this lentil now has what we call a sprout on it. So I'm going to grab a couple. And I did this so that you can just see the difference. Typically, I'll soak and sprout my lentils for just a day. And they'll have a shorter sprout on them, and I put them on top of my salads. So if I just put a good handful of lentils like this onto my salad, for those of you who are out there that want to talk about how you need protein powder, you need this and that, you need muscle building qualities. You know, it's funny when I'm in the gym, sometimes I was in the gym earlier today, and the little guy that's always in there, I'm being bad, you know, so he's talking about stuff. I don't do protein powder. I think I carry a pretty nice sized muscle. I eat a lot of lentils. This is like the perfect protein. So just a handful of these on top of a green salad would be more protein than you would get from a T-bone steak that your body can actually assimilate. And your body not only can assimilate this, but it does it very quickly. What does that mean? That means that your body is going to benefit from the protein content in this because it's so easy to digest, because we've taken it to almost like a pre-digestive state. At this point, to eat that T-bone steak is a protein source coming from an animal source, which means it is going to stay, first of all, in your body for 72 hours. And the amount of protein that your body will actually be able to assimilate from it, since it's been cooked and processed, is like little to none. Whereas the protein that's already available in lentils is pretty significant, but when I soak and sprout them, I can increase that value like 300%. The enzymatic action goes up like 1,000%. And we talked about that before. What's the key to being healthy? It's the amount of enzymes that you have in your body working to help you be able to process food, digest food, detoxify the body. And so that's when you start talking, that's why we talk about live foods, raw fruits and vegetables, raw fruits and vegetables in a raw state will keep the enzymes in those foods readily available for the body's utilization. But when I soak and sprout, I am adding enzymatic activity to the food, in addition to vitamin C. And so also when we soak and sprout, we make starches that are in nuts and seeds and grains. We break them down to simple sugars. And when the body can use simple sugars, we have vitality. We have all of this extra energy without the bad sugars that bring on the spreaded hips and everything else that comes along with it. Not only does it take the starches and breaks them down to simple sugars, but it takes the proteins and breaks them down to simple amino acids, which the body needs amino acids in order to function properly. And the fats the little bit of fat that you'll find in nuts and seeds and grains, well, not so much the nuts, you'll find a good amount of fat that the heart can utilize from in nuts, but in grains and lentils and seeds, you're not going to have a lot of fats, but it takes that fat and makes it into soluble fatty acids, which are extremely good. And we know that because people are always telling you get your fatty acids in. And most people have to take them in a supplemental form because there aren't clean sources that you can get from it, which is why we grind our flax seeds and use them. So that's the whole deal with why we want to soak and sprout. During World War, there are hundreds of reports, medical reports, research claims, statistics that talk about the value of sprouted foods. During World War II especially, many people were, what do you call it, when you demand the government tells the scientists and other people to find something to replace meat and dairy products because of the anticipated, what they thought were going to be shortages. You know, food chain supply shortages always happen when you're in a war. And so at that time they were like, how are people going to get their protein? And so they were like, find some studies, do some work, what can we do to replace it? So all the research came back saying, hey, all people need to do is get soybeans, soak and sprout them, mung beans, lentils, and they'll be fine. They'll have more than enough protein sources. They'll have more than enough sustainable energy. It is said that an individual that lives off of sprouts can be sustainable, that you don't need anything else. And so that's pretty, that's some good information, but that's another lecture to kind of wrap your head around it. And so the other thing, so we can do lots with this. First of all, you can just take the lentils. I usually try to take a handful of lentils, a handful of chickpea sprouts, and just put them onto my salads. It gives it a nice kind of grainy texture to it. For those of you who like chicken salad and stuff like that, that's what it's going to feel like in terms of the texture on your tongue. You can do so much with it. You can simply put them into a food processor with oil and tahini, and you can make like a hummus. I had put an example here. So I always keep something in the refrigerator that's soaked and sprouted. So this is a hummus that I made that you can just smell it. If you were here, you could smell the garlic and everything that comes out of it. So that's nothing but soaked and sprouted chickpeas. You put them into a blender or a food processor with a little olive oil, some raw tahini, your favorite parsley, cilantro, a little sea salt if you choose, and bam, you've got a couple of containers of raw hummus. You can put a wallet of that onto a salad top. You can put it onto some raw bread. You know, take an avocado, slice it up, and put it on a piece of something with a red onion, and just an amazing flavor, but it's sustainable energy. This is the kind of food that you eat when you're gonna run a marathon the next day and you don't want to get tired and you don't want to be eating along the run. I mean, this is the stuff that keeps you going. It keeps your mind working when you've had 18, 22-hour days. And so those are the lentils. But then we have wheat berries. So for those of us who are sugar addicts or whatever, what are wheat berries? When you look in recipes and it always, you know, the sugar cookie recipes, and it adds maltic acid to it, which you never want to eat anything that has any type of acid added to it. But maltic acid is naturally occurring when it comes naturally from food, but what they're adding in it is the thing that you don't want to put in your body. Well, these are wheat berries. They're called berries for a reason, because when you soak and sprout them, same process, you put them into a bowl of water, you soak them for 6 to 8 hours, and then day by day, you just make sure that you keep and maintain the moisture. So what did Jesus do with his people? The disciples had to keep in relationship with him, had to be in his environment, they had to be under his teachings. The thing that makes this work, soaking and sprouting, is maintaining the environmental conditions that they need. So you can use a glass jar, you can use a jar just like this, or a mason jar, anything that has a wide mouth on it, 2 tablespoons of seeds will net you a pound or 2 of, you know, whatever it is that you're soaking or sprouting. I use hemp bags. These are Sprout Man hemp bags. And so I always, every day, I have something soaking and sprouting, and when I'm done, then that's what happens. So to soak these, you just put 2 tablespoons of these are actually buckwheat. And so, you know, if you can see it, buckwheat is black in color. They've only been soaking and sprouting for a day. So what I'll do is I'll put my seeds in here, and then I'll just sit this in a bowl of water to soak it for 6 or 7 hours. And then every day, I just spray it with water. I don't want to use the sprayer. I don't have a filter on my thing, so I'll just douse it with water, just showing you how simple it is, and let it drain. And you see how you do it twice a day. See how the bags are still wet. So you just want to make sure that you keep it moist. I think these are alfalfa sprouts. So alfalfa sprouts are really, really small. So they usually take 5 to 7 days. Again, you're just making sure that you maintain the right amount of moisture. On days like this, when it's 60-ish or so, it may take 3 days to sprout. In the wintertime, it's going to be taking 5 to 7 days. But in summertime, chickpeas, I can get them to sprout in a day. In the wintertime, it might be 2, depending on how warm you have it in your homes. But again, wheat berries, a little or nothing, maybe $3 max a pound, maybe as low as $2.50 a pound. And so typically, I keep sprouted wheat berries because I'll grind it and I'll cover it with water. I'll let it sit for 2 days to make the fermented water. Well, these have a longer tail, which means that they're going to be sweeter. So see how long that tail is? Kind of looks like a spider. You really don't want them to grow too much longer. When they get to be 3 times the length of the berry or the seed, that's when they're going to start being a little bitter, you know. But that's okay because I'm making lentil bread. And so lentil bread is not supposed to be sweet. And if I want it to be sweet, I can simply add some raw honey to it. And so that's what I just wanted you to see. And so at any time, I always have sprouted something in the refrigerator. And this is from, so we call nuts, soaking the nuts and seeds, a soaking and sprouting process, but they're not going to grow a tail to them. So these are almonds that I just started soaking this morning, and that's why they're a little white, because I'll put a tad bit of hydrogen peroxide in the soaking water just to get any type of residue because of the mumps that they may have been sitting unshelled off of it. And then I'll drain these and I'll rinse them and let them soak in fresh spring water or filtered water or distilled water for another 6 hours, and then they'll be ready to use. And you can throw those in the blender and do a multiplicity of things with them, or you can just put them on whatever you want to eat with nuts, because you want to soak them so that they become digestible. In the dehydrated state, it's just too much. Again, I wish you were here so you could just smell the aroma. So just smelling raw food is like amazing. So this is like a walnut pate. So instead of using walnuts, I could very well use those almonds. And basically that's it. You take the almonds and you grind them in a food processor, and you can see the relatively large pieces of celery, red peppers, onion, garlic. You can smell the garlic. And you just mix it all together. You can add a little bit or a whole lot of olive oil, a little bit, none, or a whole lot of sea salt, and that's it. And these dishes take 2 minutes. So you take a spoonful of the walnut pate, a spoonful of the hummus, you slice an avocado. I always keep the dry seaweed, and you just put dry seaweed into a container and let it become soft where it looks like collard greens, and mix that all together and add a handful of things, and you're just going to be like I was the other night at 1 o'clock in the morning. You just like a buzzing. You cannot go to sleep because it's just too much energy in you. So 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm catching up on Facebook saying hello to everybody. That's the only time I have to be on Facebook, is when I am laying in the bed, because I've been eating way too much raw food at one time. So what I'm going to do quickly is I'm going to show you. So we know, we know onions. Don't you love live video? So we know, and thank God I had way more than I needed. You can never have too many onions, never have too much garlic. Whenever I tell people, they say, how much garlic? So if you tell me 2 things of garlic, I'm going to use 6. So, but let's talk about onions and garlic. So I didn't chop this up yet for that reason. So we have garlic and we have red onions. We have lemons, and these actually are tangerines, mandarins. But oranges and lemons are like sisters and brothers in that citric family. Apples and pears. Then you have garlic and onions are like twins. And so there's something called anisin that is in the red onion and garlic, which gives the body this level of sulfur that makes it extremely difficult for bacteria that causes viruses and things like that to survive in your body. Cancerous things that grow, anything that's growing inside of you that's not supposed to be growing inside of you, when this is in that same environment, it makes it impossible for it to continue to grow. That's all I'm going to say about that. So red onions and garlic, if you've got a migraine or something like red garlic and onions, I mean, that's just, it's healing in a very simple fashion. So this is what we're going to do really quick, because some people need that. I could just tell you to take this and put it in a food processor and grind it up. But I think we're pretty good on time today. It won't take but a minute. So what I'm going to do is just show you how easy this is and how we get from one place to another place. So this is one of my mini food processors. So if you could see, I have like 15, I have probably 6 food processors. I have way too many juicers. And someone just gave me another juicer that I have here. I was like, I do not need another juicer. I use the Breville juicer. This is a Cuisinart. I had another one that I had recently purchased. They don't make them like they used to. I used to have one, you had to lift it like that. It was so heavy. These little plastic things just don't work as well to me. So check this out. There's no oil. There's nothing involved except what we talked about. So imagine that. This is what you're getting in your bread. So when you look at a container of bread, a loaf of bread from a supermarket or wherever, and you start reading the ingredients, once you get past enriched flour, which I told you guys last week. It's funny, I was in a store recently that I hadn't been in before. I wasn't familiar with it, so everything in there wasn't like whole, pure, and whatever. So they had some little funny crackers, and I picked it up, and the first thing I saw was enriched flour, and I just like put it back. And so some lady was looking at me. She's like, "Oh, your skin is gorgeous. What was it in that ingredient list that made you put it back? Because I want to eat what you're eating." Right, and I just looked at her. I said, "The first ingredient, enriched flour." I had a short conversation with her about why you don't want to do that, and then I remembered when I said that to you guys in terms of a good way to get started. I said, if you didn't want to make any major changes in your life or your diet, but you wanted to actually start changing, that would be a significant place to start. To just go through your pantry, your home, and from now on, as you're going to the supermarket for the next 30 days, anything that says enriched, especially enriched wheat, white flour, any kind of flour, or enriched anything, put it back. And that would just be like, wow. You would find out just how much you would not be able to consume. So what we're going to do is we're only going to grind the sprouts. We're going to fold in the onions and the garlic, and I'm going to add some caraway seed. Now, you can do whatever you want to do. This is a basic bread. It's a basic bread, as you can still hear me. So it's a basic bread. If you want to do like an Italian bread, you can add black onions, chopped tomatoes, a little jalapeno peppers, whatever you want. Again, earlier I had mentioned honey. And I was somewhere yesterday. I just hate noise. And so it's grind, you can smell it. And so people think, lentils and sprouts. But you can smell the sweetness because the wheat berries have gone from what? The starch to the simple sugar. And so what that means for a wheat berry is it basically has turned into sugar. And so that whole sweet thing that you get from muffins and cakes that they have to add that maltic acid to, you get it when you start grinding up. Talk about this noise is going on. So let's mince our garlic. So if you're like me and I love garlic, and think about it. How many of you would buy garlic bread? How many of you love garlic bread when you go to a restaurant? Everybody. So the choice is going to be yours as to whether or not you just want to chop this up in nice chunky pieces of garlic, or you want to mince it. And so even though I love garlic, I'm going to mince mine, but I'm going to mince like 6 or 7 pieces of it so that it will be plentiful in the taste. And so that's what you're going to end up folding in along with the onions and whatever else you want to add. If you want to add chopped tomatoes or whatever. And so you kind of want it, so if you want it to taste like an Italian bread, then you would probably put some Italian dry seasonings in it. You would probably put the black olives or whatever. So for me, this is basically my lentil wheat bread. I'm going to be eating it with raw hummus. I'm going to be eating it with walnut pate. I don't necessarily need anything sweet, a sweet bread. I'm looking for some texture. I'm looking for something to hold my sliced avocado, my sliced red onion, and everything else I might want to build up my walnut pate sandwich, so to speak. for those of you who are real bakers, and you know when your mother was making bread, or whoever was making bread, when the Egyptians were making bread, you put a little water in it, and that becomes your dough very quickly. And you know, sometimes people, some of you are just listening because you want to be entertained. Some of you, some people inbox me, and sometimes some of your comments are kind of funny, what you pay attention to when we're doing these. But some people are actually making the recipes, making the dishes. And that's why I'm going through this, because you might have started doing that and just took it out, and then you're going to be like, this doesn't taste like bread. And so I'm showing you the process so that when you run into what might be a glitch or something, you know how to work through it. And I never do that. I never add water to it. You just kind of go with it because you want somewhat of a dry, flat bread almost. And basically, in the summertime, I won't even put this on the dehydrator. I'll just mix it up, because remember, you can have your salad with a handful of sprouts on it. It doesn't have to be processed in the sense of put onto a dehydrator or into an oven on 120 degrees. But in the summertime, when it is a hot day and the sun is piping, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you can come in and grind this up, literally, and put it into a bowl, stir it up. Fold your other ingredients in, like we're going to do right quick, and flatten it out on a cookie sheet or something, and just sit it out in the sun. And you'll be surprised, the moisture will evaporate very quickly on a warm day, and you'll start to smell it, just like you're going past a bakery that has fresh bread cooking. This might be a bit much garlic for just that little batch. So that was actually about 2 cups of sprouted wheat berries and about 2 cups of sprouted lentils. Got about 8 pieces of garlic and way too much onion. But we're going to fold it into what has come out here. And that is going to be that simple process of how you make bread. How you make your own homemade bread. And for those of you who have infants, toddlers at home, and you just want to start building them the right way, building them, growing them, turning them from ordinary babies into extraordinary people. Start giving them some bread when they start, you know how kids, wherever that turning point is, where that child is getting on your last nerve, and you start giving them the M&Ms or whatever, that age. Don't ever get to that point. Get to a point where you develop them on this kind of stuff, and they'll become addicted to it. It'll become such a part of their life that when they have some bread from a processed supermarket, or that's got all that crap in it, they're gonna be like, what is that? I don't want to, kids usually do when they eat vegetables. They're going to do like that. And you just start them with that. And it's going to be easy because this has wheat berries in it. Yes, it has the lentil sprouts in it. Lentils have, to me, a very good flavor to them. But the wheat berries is what makes this sweet. And so sometimes you might take a chickpea, what else? A rye. I make a pumpernickel by using sprouted rye, and then I'll just add carrot powder to it, and it turns into a wonderful black bread, and it's so good. And so see how simple that is? See how the texture is like a bread? It smells wonderful, but I'm telling you, the wheat berries is going to give it that nice sweet flavor that many people just need when they're having a bread, a cracker, or something. I was talking to somebody last night, and I was like, what are you eating at midnight? And she said, it's a she was proud to say, a multi-grain cracker. I bet you I know where she probably got it from. I said, yeah, look at the second ingredient on the ingredient list. I guarantee you it's sugar. I guarantee you. So that's our bread. And so you can do it just like that. Put it on that sheet and sit it in the sun. The moisture will evaporate and it will turn crispy. But I'm going to actually make like 3 by 4 inch cracker things like that and put them on the dehydrator. Let them stay there for about 12 hours and it's going to be nice and crispy. And that's it. And then I'll be good to go. And so I've taken that very simple, staple, inexpensive food and making it into something extraordinary. And that's what Christ wants to do with our lives. He wants to take our simple, ordinary life, whoever you are, wherever you are right now, let him use you. He will make you. He doesn't need you to make you. And remember that, because he can do extraordinary things with the ordinary people. I hope this has been helpful. I hope that you will try that on your own. We'll see what we're going to do next week. Unfortunately, we only meet every other week, so in between here and there, you'll experience Palm Sunday, which is a wonderful Sunday, and Good Friday. But we will be here before Easter. Take care.